Theories of Personality, 11th edition, Chapter 3, Book Reading. Carl Jung, Analytical Psychology. Sigmund Freud once designated Carl Jung as his spiritual son and heir, but Jung went on to develop his own theory of personality that differed dramatically from orthodox psychoanalysis. He fashioned a new and elaborate explanation of human nature quite unlike any other, which he called analytical psychology. The first point on which Jung came to disagree with Freud was the role of sexuality. Jung broadened Freud's definition of libido by redefining it as a more generalized psychic energy that included sex but was not restricted to it. The second major area of disagreement concerned the direction of the forces that influence personality. Whereas Freud viewed human beings as prisoners or victims of past events, Jung believed that man is not necessarily doomed forever to be shoved about by traumas over which he could exercise little control. Jung argued that we are shaped by our future as well as our past. We are affected not only by what happened to us as children, but also what we aspire to do in the future. The third significant point of difference revolved around the unconscious rather than minimizing the role of the unconscious, as did other neo-psychoanalytic dissenters we will discuss. Jung placed an even greater emphasis on it than Freud did. He probed more deeply into the unconscious and added an entirely new dimension, the inherited experiences of all human and even pre-human species. Although Freud had recognized the influence of inherited primal experiences, Jung made it the core of his system of personality. He brought together ideas from history, mythology, anthropology, and religion to form his own image of human nature. The Life of Jung, 1875 to 1961. An Unhappy Childhood. Jung's difficult and unhappy childhood years were marked by deaths and funerals, neurotic parents and a failing marriage, religious doubts and conflicts, bizarre dreams and visions, and a wooden doll for his only companion. Born in Switzerland into a family that included 9 clergymen, Jung was introduced at an early age to religion and the classics. He was close to his father, but considered him weak and powerless. Although kind and tolerant, Jung's father experienced periods of moodiness and irritability and failed to be the strong authority figure his son needed. Jung's mother was far by the more powerful parent, but her emotional instability led her to behave erratically. She would change in an instant from being cheerful and happy to suddenly mumbling incoherently and gazing into space. As a boy, Jung came to view his mother as being 2 different people inhabiting the same body. As a result of his mother's odd behavior, Jung became wary of all women, a suspicion that took many years to dispel. He later described his mother as being fat and unattractive, which may explain why he totally rejected Freud's notion that every boy has an Oedipus complex. To avoid his parents and their continuing marital problems, Jung spent many hours alone in the attic, carving a doll out of wood, a figure in whom he could confine his innermost thoughts and fears. Strange dreams and fantasies. Distrustful of his mother and disappointed in his father, Jung felt cut off from the external world, the world of conscious reality. As an escape, he turned inward to his unconscious, to the world of dreams, visions, and fantasies, in which he felt more secure. This choice would guide Jung for the rest of his life. Whenever he was faced with a problem, he would look for a solution through his dreams and visions. The essence of his personality theory was shaped in essentially the same way. When Jung was 3, he dreamed he was in a cavern. In a later dream, he saw himself digging down beneath the earth's surface, unearthing the bones of prehistoric creatures. To Jung, such dreams represented the direction of his approach to the human personality. They directed him to explore the unconscious mind, which lies beneath the surface of behavior. So strong was he guided by these So strongly was he guided by these manifestations of his unconscious that he entitled his autobiography Memories, Dreams, Reflections. He believed that his approach to personality resembled a subjective personal confession. Thus, like Freud's work, Jung's personality theory was intensely autobiographical. In a lecture given at the age of 50, he acknowledged the influence of his life events on his theory. So strongly was he guided by these manifestations. As a child, Jung deliberately avoided the other children. They avoided him. Jung's loneliness reflected on his theory, which which focuses on the inner growth of the individual rather than on relationships with other people. In contrast, Freud's theory is concerned with more interpersonal relationships, perhaps because Freud, unlike Jung, did not have such an isolated and introverted childhood. The study of medicine. Jung disliked school and resented the time he had to devote to formal studies rather than to ideas that interested him. That's normal. He much preferred to read on his own, particularly about religious and philosophical issues. To his delight, he was forced to miss 6 months of school as a result of fainting spells. He returned to school, but his presence was disruptive. His teachers sent him home because his classmates were more interested in waiting for him to faint. When Jung overheard his father say, "What will become of the boy if he cannot earn his living?" his illness suddenly disappeared and returned to school to work more diligently than before. Jung later wrote that the experience taught him about neurotic behavior. He recognized that he had unconsciously arranged the situation to suit himself to keep him out of school, and the realization made him feel angry and ashamed. Jung chose to study medicine at the University of Basel and decided, to the disappointment of his professors, to specialize in psychiatry, a field then held in low repute. He believed that psychiatry would give him the opportunity to pursue his interests in dreams, the supernatural, and the occult. Beginning in 1900, Jung worked at a mental hospital in Zurich under the direction of Eugene Balleur, the psychiatrist who coined the term schizophrenia. When Jung married the second richest heiress in all of Switzerland, he quit his job at the hospital and spent his spare time riding around the countryside in his much-loved red Chrysler convertible. He also gave lectures at the University of Zurich and developed an independent clinical practice. The years with Freud. By the time Jung became associated with Freud in 1907, Jung had already established a significant professional reputation on his own. When Jung and Freud met for the first time, they were so congenial and had so much to share that they talked for 13 hours. Their friendship became a close one. Jung considered Freud a father figure. The relationship appeared to contain many of the elements of an Oedipus complex, with its inevitable wish of the son to destroy the father. Also, their relationship may have been tainted, even doomed, by a sexual experience Jung said he had at the age of 18. A family friend, an older man who had been a father figure and confidant, made physical overtures to Jung seeking a homosexual encounter. Repelled and disappointed, Jung broke off the relationship. Years later, when Freud, who was nearly 20 years older than Jung, attempted to disengage Jung as his son and heir, Jung may have felt Freud was in a sense forcing himself on Jung and changing the nature of their relationship. Because of Jung's earlier encounter, he may have been similarly disappointed in Freud and unable to sustain an emotionally close relationship with him. For a time, however, the two men remained close. Jung continued to live in Zurich, but he met with Freud periodically and correspondence. In 1909, he traveled with Freud to the United States to lecture. Freud was grooming Jung to take over the presidency of the International Psychoanalytic Association, concerned that psychoanalysis would be labeled a Jewish science. Jung was not an uncritical disciple. Jung had his own ideas and view of the human personality, and when he began to express these notions, they began to part. It was fully severed in 1913. Jung's necrotic episode. The same year when Jung was 38 years old, he suffered a severe neurotic episode that lasted 3 years. He believed he was in danger of losing contact with reality and was so distressed that he resigned his lectureship. At times he considered suicide. Although he felt unable to continue with his scientific work, he somehow continued to treat his patients. During the crisis, Jung experienced vivid and violent dreams and visions involving large-scale disasters such as ice covering the earth, rivers of blood, destruction of civilization. Other dreams were more personal, but equally terrifying. During those years, he was haunted by visions of a bloody apocalypse and widespread carnage and desolation. He meticulously recorded these dreams in calligraphy and elaborate drawings in some 200 pages of what became known as the Red Book, so called because it was bound in red leather. The journal was kept secret in a Swiss bank vault and was not published until 2009, nearly 50 years after his death. The book received widespread publicity and quickly became an international sensation. Freud, as we saw, had also suffered an neurotic episode at the same age and resolved it by analyzing his dreams. Jung's situation offers a remarkable parallel. Jung overcame his disturbance by confronting his unconscious. Although Jung's self-analysis was less systematic, his approach was similar to Freud's. Out of Jung's confrontation with his unconscious, he fashioned his approach to personality. He concluded that the most crucial stage in personality development was not the childhood, but middle age. Like Freud, Jung established his theory on an intuitive basis which derived from his personal experience and dreams. Jung's sex life. He surrounded himself with adoring women and disciples who fell in love with him. He was very active, and he enjoyed his life to the fullest. And that's what he did. Fame and weird behavior. The rest of his life was personally and professionally successful, though he did have some bizarre ways. In the morning, he would greet the kitchen utensils. He also worried needlessly about money, even though he was quite wealthy. He would hide a lot of money and then forget how to find the money. Young and his wife adopted a cold, formal manner for dealing with their 3 daughters. There was limited physical contact, no hugging, no kissing. Young remained productive in research and writing for most of his 86 years. His books became popular, and his analytical psychology attracted increasing numbers of followers. His ideas spread to the English-speaking world, and particularly to the United States, primarily through the generous financial support of the wealthy and prominent Rockefeller, McCormick, and Mellon families. A number of the family members sought analysis with Young and in return arranged for the translation and publication of his books into English. Psychic energy, the basis of Jung's system. One of the first points on which Jung disagreed with Freud is the nature of libido. He did not believe libido was primarily sexual energy, it was just a broad, undifferentiated life energy. He used the term libido in 2 ways. First, as a diffuse internal life energy, and second, from a perspective similar to Freud's, as a narrower psychic energy that fuels the work on personality, which he called the psyche. It is through psychic energy that psychological activities such as perceiving, thinking, feeling, and wishing are carried out. When a person invests a great deal of psychic energy in a particular idea or feeling, it is said to have a high psychic value and can strongly influence that person's life. For example, if you're highly motivated to achieve power, then you will devote most of your psychic energy and devise ways of obtaining it. Principles of psychic energy. Jung drew on ideas from physics to explaining the function of psychic energy. He proposed 3 basic principles: opposites, equivalency, and entropy. The principles of opposites can be seen throughout his system. He noted the existence of opposites or polarities in physical energy, such as heat, cold, height, depth, creation, decay. So it is with psychic energy, he argued, every wish or feeling has its opposite. This opposition, this conflict between polarities, is the primary motivator of behavior and generator of energy. The stronger the conflict, the greater the energy. First principle of equivalence, he applied the physical principle of the conservation of energy to psychic events, just shifting stuff over, things change. The word equivalence implies that the area to which energy has shifted must be an equal psychic value. That is, it should be equally desirable, compelling, or fascinating. Otherwise, the excess energy will flow into the unconscious. In physics, the principle of entropy refers to equalization of energy differences. Jung applied this law of physical energy by proposing that there is a tendency toward maintaining a balance or equilibrium in the personality. If 2 desires or beliefs differ greatly in intensity or psychic value, energy will flow from the more strongly held to the weaker. Aspects of personality. The ego. The ego is the center of consciousness, the part of the psyche concerned with perceiving, thinking, feeling, and remembering. It is our awareness of ourselves and is responsible for carrying out all the normal everyday activities of waking life. The ego acts in a selective way, emitting into consciousness awareness only a portion of the stimuli to which we are exposed. The attitudes, extroversions, and introversion. Much of our conscious perception of our environment and how we react to it is determined by the opposing mental attitudes of extroversion and introversion. Jung believed that psychic energy could be channeled externally toward the outside world or internally toward the self. Extroverts are open, sociable, and socially assertive, oriented toward other people and the external world. Introverts are withdrawn and often shy and tend to focus on themselves and their own thoughts and feelings. According to Jung, all of us have the capacity for both attitudes, but only one becomes dominant in our personality. The dominant attitude then The dominant attitude then tends to direct our behavior unconscious. Behavior unconscious. Behavior unconscious. The non-dominant attitude still remains influential, however, when it becomes part of the universal, personal unconscious where it can affect behavior. Psychological functions. As Jung came to recognize there are different kinds of extroverts and introverts, he proposed additional distinctions among people based on what he called the psychological functions. These functions refer to different, and opposing ways of perceiving both the external real world and our subjective inner world. Jung posited 4 functions of the psyche: sensing, intuiting, thinking, and feeling. Sensing and intuiting are grouped together as non-rational functions because they do not use the process of reason. These functions accept experiences and do not evaluate them. Sensing reproduces an experience with senses the way a photograph copies an object. Intuiting does not arise directly from external stimulus. For example, blah 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 blah. The second pair of opposing functions, thinking and feeling, are rational functions that involve making judgments and evaluations about our experiences. Although thinking and feeling are opposites, both are concerned with organizing and categorizing experiences. The thinking function involves a conscious judgment of whether an experience is true or false. The kind of evaluation made by the feeling function is expressed in terms of like or dislike, pleasantness or unpleasantness, stimulation or dullness. Just as our psyche contains some of both the extroversion and introversion attitudes, so do we have the capacity for all 4 psychological functions. Similarly, just as one attitude is dormant, only one function is dominant. The others are submerged in the personal unconscious. Further, only one pair of functions is dominant, either the rational or irrational, and within each pair only one function is dominant. Psychological types. He proposed 8 psychological types based on interactions of the 2 attitudes and 4 functions. The extroverted thinking types live strictly in accordance with society's rules. These people to repress feelings and emotions, and to be objective in all aspects, and to be dogmatic in thinking, in thoughts and opinions. They may be perceived as rigid and cold. They tend to make good scientists because they focus on learning is about the external world and using logical rules to describe and understand it. The extroverted feeling types tend to repress the thinking mode and to be highly emotional. They conform to the traditional values and moral codes they've been taught and are unusually sensitive to the opinions and expectations of others. They are emotionally repressive, make friends easily, and tend to be sociable and effervescent. Jung believed this type to be found more often among women than men. The extroverted sensing types focus on pleasure and happiness and on seeking new experiences. They are strongly oriented toward the real world and are adaptable to different kinds of people and changing situations. Not given to introspection, they tend to be outgoing with a high capacity for enjoying life. The extroverted, intuiting types find success in business and politics because of a keen ability to exploit opportunities. They're attached to new ideas, tend to be creative, and are able to inspire others to accomplish and achieve. They also tend to be changeable, from moving from one idea or venture to another, and to make decisions based more on punches rather than on reflections. The introverted thinking types do not get along well with other people and have different communicating ideas. They focus on thoughts rather than feelings and have poor practical judgment. Intensely concerned with privacy, they prefer to deal with abstractions and theories. And they focus on understanding themselves rather than other people, other than as stubborn, aloof, arrogant, and inconsiderate. The introverted feeling types repress national thought. They are capable of deep emotion but avoid any outward expression of it. They seem mysterious and inaccessible and tend to be quiet, modest, and childish. They have little consideration for others' feelings and thoughts and appear withdrawn, cold, and self-assured. The introverted sensing types appear passive, calm, and detached from the everyday world. They look on most human activities with benevolence and amusement. They are aesthetically sensitive, expressing themselves in art or music, and tend to repress their intuition. The introverted intuition types focus so intently on intuition that they have little contact with reality. They are visionaries and daydreamers. Aloof, 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 aloof. They are aloof, unconcerned with practical matters, and poorly understood by others. Considered odd and eccentric, they have difficulty coping with everyday life and planning for the future. The personal unconscious. The personal unconscious is Jung's system. In Jung's system is similar to Freud's concept of the pre-conscious. It is a reservoir of material that was once conscious but has been forgotten or suppressed because it was trivial or disturbing. There is considerable two-way traffic back and forth between the ego and personal unconscious. Complexes. As we file more and more experiences in our personal unconscious, we begin to group them into what Jung called complexes. A complex is a core or pattern of emotions, memories, perceptions, and wishes organized around a common theme. For example, blah 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 blah, by directing thoughts and behaviors by directing thoughts and behavior in various ways. The complex determines how that person perceives the world. Complexes may be conscious or unconscious. Those that are not under conscious control can intrude on, interfere with consciousness. The person with a complex is generally not aware of its influence. Although other people may easily observe its effects, some complexes may be harmful, but others can be useful. For the collective unconscious, the deepest and least accessible level of the psyche, the collective unconscious is the most unusual and controversial aspect of Jung's system. Jung believed that just as each of us accumulates and files all our personal experiences in the personal unconscious, so does humankind collectively as the species store the experience of all human and pre-human ancestors in the collective unconscious. The heritage is passed to each new generation. He believed that whatever experiences are universal, that is, are repeated by each generation, become part of our personality. Our primitive past thus becomes the basis of the human psyche, directing and influencing our present behavior. To Jung, the collective unconscious was the powerful and controlling repository of ancestral experiences. Thus, Jung linked the personality of each of us with the past, not only with the childhood, but also with the history of the species. We do not inherit these collective experiences directly. For example, we do not inherit the fear of snakes, but we inherit a potential to fear them. We are predisposed to behave and feel the same ways people have always behaved and felt. Jung believed that certain basic experiences have characterized every generation throughout human history. People have always had a mother figure and experience birth and death. They have faced unknown terrors in the dark, worshipped power or some sort of figure, and feared evil. The universality of these experiences over countless evolving generations leaves an imprint on each of us at birth and determines how we perceive and react to the world. A baby is predisposed to perceive the mother in a certain way. If the mother behaves the way mothers behave, then baby's predisposition will correspond with its reality. Because the collective unconscious is such an unusual concept, it is important to note the reason Jung proposed it and the kind of evidence he gathered to support it in his studies of ancient cultures, both mythical and real. Jung discovered what he believed to be common themes and symbols that appeared in the diverse parts of the world. As far as he could determine, these ideas have not been transmitted or communicated orally in writing from one culture to another. Archetypes, the ancient experience contained in the collective unconscious, are manifested by recurring themes or patterns which Jung called archetypes. He also used the term primordial images. There are many such images, as many as there are common human experiences. By being repeated in the lives of the succeeding generations, archetypes have become imprinted in our psyches and are expressed in our dreams and fantasies. Among the archetypes Jung proposed are the hero, the mother, the child, God, death, power, and the wise old man. A few of these are developed more fully than others and influence the psyche more consistently. The major archetypes include the persona, the amnesia, the animus, the shadow, and the self. The persona. The word persona refers to a mask that an actor wears to display various roles or faces to the audience. Jung used the term with basically the same meaning. The persona archetype is a mask, a public face we wear to present ourselves as someone different from who we really are. The persona is necessary, Jung believed, because we are forced to play so many roles in life in order to succeed in school and on the job and in getting along with a variety of people. Although the persona can be helpful, it can also be harmful if we come to believe that it reflects our true nature. Instead of merely playing a role, we may then become that role. As a result, other aspects of our personality will not be allowed to develop. When this happens, the ego may come to identify with the persona rather than with the person's true nature, resulting in a condition known as inflation of the persona. The anemia and animus archetypes refer to Jung's recognition that humans are essentially bisexual. On the biological levels, each sex secretes the hormones of the other sex as well as their own. It's basically how we should show opposite gender stuff. It's interesting. The shadow, the most powerful archetype, has the sinister and mysterious name of shadow, which contains the basic primitive animal instincts and therefore has the deepest roots of all archetypes. Behaviors that society considers evil and immoral reside in the shadow, and the dark side of human nature must be tamed if people are to live in harmony. But that presents us with a dilemma, because not only is the shadow the source of evil, it's the source of creativity, emotion, and vitality. Therefore, if the shadow is totally suppressed, the psyche will be dull and lifeless. The ego has to repress the animal instincts enough so that we can be civilized. If it's fully suppressed, not only will the personality become flat, but the person also faces the possibility the shadow will revolt. The self archetype represents the unity, integrity, and harmony of the total personality. To Jung, the striving toward the wholeness is the ultimate goal of life. This archetype involves bringing together and balancing all parts of the personality. We have already noted Jung's principle of opposites and the importance of polarities to the psyche. In the self archetype, the opposites of conscious and unconscious process must become assimilated to that the self, which is the center of the personality, shifts from the ego to the point of equilibrium, midway between the opposing forces of the conscious and the unconscious. The full realization of the self lies in the future. It is a goal or something to always strive for but is rarely achieved. The self cannot begin to emerge until all other systems of the psyche have developed. This occurs around middle age, a crucial period of transition in Jung's system as it was in his own life. The development of the personality. Jung believed that personality is determined by what we hope to be as well as what we have been in the past, and by what happened to us then. He criticized Freud for emphasizing only past events as shapers of personality to the exclusion of the future. Jung took a longer view of personality than Freud, that it's, more than just childhood ages. Childhood to young adulthood. The ego begins to develop in early childhood, at first in a primitive way because the child has not formed a unique identity. What might be called the children's personalities are at this stage little more than a reflection of the personalities of their parents. Parents might try to force their own personalities on their children, wanting them to be an extension. It is not until puberty that the psyche assumes a definitive form and content. This period, which Jung called our psychic birth, is marked by difficulties and the need to adapt. Our focus during these years is external, our conscious is dormant, and in general, our primary conscious attitude is that of extroversion. Jung believed that the major personality changes occur between the ages of 35 and 40. This period of middle age was the time of personal crisis for Jung. And for many of his patients, by that age, the adaptation problems of young adulthood have usually been resolved. The typical 40-year-old is established in a career, a marriage, and a community. Jung asked why, when success has been achieved, so many people of that age are gripped by feelings of despair and worthlessness. His patients all told him essentially the same thing. They felt empty, adventure, excitement, and zest has disappeared. Life has lost its meaning. The more Jung analyzed this period, the more strongly he believed that such drastic personality changes were inevitable and universal. Middle age is a natural time of transition in which the personality is supposed to undergo necessary and beneficial changes. Ironically, the changes occur because middle-aged people have been so successful in meeting life's demands. They have invested a great deal of energy in the preparatory activities in the first half of life, but by age 40 that is finished and those challenges have been met. Although they still possess considerable energy, it is now nowhere to go. So it's rechanneled into different activities and interests. Jung noted that in the first half of life we must focus on the objective world of reality. In contrast, the second half must be devoted to the inner, subjective world that has been neglected. Middle age, we begin the process of realizing or actualizing the self. If we are successful in integrating the unconscious with the conscious, then we are in a position to attain a new level of positive psychological health. Individuation, how to reach fulfillment. Individuation involves becoming an individual, fulfilling one's capacities and developing oneself. It is innate and inevitable, but it can be helped or hindered by mental forces. Confront the unconscious. To strive for individualization, middle-aged people must abandon the behaviors and values that guided the first half of their lives and confront their unconscious, bringing it into conscious awareness and accepting what it tells them to do. They must listen to their dreams and follow their fantasies, exercising creative imagination through writing, painting, or some other form. They must let themselves be guided not by the rational thinking, but by spontaneous flow. Jung cautioned that admitting unconscious forces into conscious awareness does not mean being dominated by them. It must be assimilated and balanced with the conscious. Dethrone the persona. Of particular importance is the midlife crisis of the individuation is the shift in the nature of the archetypes. The first change involves dethroning the persona, although we must continue to play various social roles if we are to function in the real world and get along with the different kinds of people. We must recognize that our public personality may not represent our true nature. Accept our dark side. Next, we must become aware of the destructive forces of the shadow and acknowledge the dark side of our nature with its primitive impulses such as selfishness. That does not mean that we submit to them or allow them to dominate us, but simply accept their existence. In the first half of life, we use the persona to shield this dark side from ourselves, wanting people to see only our good qualities. But in concealing the forces of the shadow from others, we also conceal that from ourselves. That of both destructive and the constructive aspects of the shadow will give the personality a deeper and fuller dimension. Awareness of only the good side of our nature pursues a one-sided development. We have to accept our anima and animus. That's straightforward. Accept it. Be open to new sources of creativity and serve as the final release of parental influences. Just be expressive, basically. Transcend. Once the psyche's structures are individuated and acknowledged, the next developmental stage can occur is transcendence. You're rising above the stuff. Questions about human nature. Jung's image of human nature is quite different from Freud's. Jung did not hold such a deterministic view, but he did agree that personality may be at least partially determined by childhood experiences and by the archetypes. However, there is ample room in Jung's system for free will and spontaneity, the latter arising from the shadow archetype. On the nature-nurture issue, Jung took a mixed position. The drive toward individual nation and transcendence is innate, but it can be aided or thwarted by learning and experience. The ultimate and necessary goal of life is the realization of the self. Although it is rarely achieved, we are continually motivated to strive for it. Jung disagreed with Freud on the importance of childhood experiences. Jung thought they were influential, but did not completely shape your personality. Each individual is unique in Jung's view, but only during the first half of life. When some progress toward individuation is made in middle age, we develop what Jung designated as universal kind of personality in which no single aspect is dominant, and presented a more positive, hopeful image of human nature than Freud did. Jung expressed concern about danger he saw facing Western culture, the sickness of disassociation. Assessment in Jung's theory. Jung's techniques for assessing the functioning of the psyche drew on science and the supernatural, resulting in both an objective and mystical approach. Jung's assessment of his patients. They did not lie in bed, lie on couch. They sat in a comfortable chair facing each other, though sometimes Jung faced a window so he could look at the lake near his house. That is such a mood. So he, lots of interesting things. He believed his patients' fancies were real to them and accepted them at face value. Three more formal techniques Jung used to evaluate personality were the word association test, symptom analysis, and dream analysis. We know word association very well. It's, let's say 100 words. You say a word, they say the first thing that comes to mind. Symptom analysis, it's symptoms used by the reported by the patient. Dream analysis, again, but this one differed from Freud's because it was more concerned with the causes and they're more than unconscious wishes. The Myers-Briggs type indicator, very, just answering a bunch of different questions, skipping over this. Research on Jung's theory. I'm skipping a lot of things now at this point because, I'm not overtly worried about these things, but it is what it is. He did not keep records of his patients' comments. He didn't attempt to verify them. Was subjective, unreliable. Research on psychological types. Studies of college studies. I'm skipping over a lot of studies because I'm not in. It's mostly about the MBTI and studies about this stuff, which I'm skipping over a lot of these things because I don't really worry about it. But reflections on basically it's the end. Reflections on Jung's theory. Jung's complex and unusual approach to the human personality has had considerable impact on a broad range of disciplines, notably psychiatry, sociology, economics, political science, philosophy, and religion. He's made a lot of impacts. The word socialization test, for one, was very important. And he was the first to emphasize the role of the future in determining behavior. Some criticisms. Reading his work can be frustrating. And his embrace of the occult and supernatural is difficult to manage. Yeah. Basically, there was a lot of good stuff for Jung, but because of his emphasis on the supernatural and occult, there are difficulties verifying validity and stuff like that. It's just because of that, it's less workable. But I think it works well. I think this was a very good chapter, in my opinion. I enjoyed this chapter more than Freud. I said that many times, and that doesn't change the fact that I feel like that's true. And yeah, I have to say, thank you for listening to me today. I appreciate y'all immensely. I basically do this to help me study, among other things. Until next time, this has been your host. Bye-bye.